Good day, and thank you for joining us today. It is the third episode that we are running through today, and it is the second last of our personal goals series. And the whole purpose of today is to speak through SMART goals. Firstly, we'd like to thank the individuals who've taken their time and watched the previous episodes that we've put through and the feedback that we've gotten. We still continue to appreciate it. And we promise that today is going to be another one of those episodes that just adds value in a short space of time. So we start off today by talking about SMART goals. The concept of SMART goals is one that was developed way back in 1981. That's the first time it touches a book, and something that was produced by Dutton George, basically for the corporate space, and basically how to go about setting out objectives that the companies that would use this acronym and the strategy of pulling out their objectives would actually go about employing. So as a starting point, it was designed for corporates. It was not designed for the church. It was not designed for individuals per se. It was not designed for families. It was designed for corporates. And we all know now that corporates take a different life form to those of individuals. However, today we are going to try and adapt it and see whether it applies indeed to personal goals. And if it does, to what extent does it? And if it does not, what stops it from doing so? The SMART acronym is basically an abbreviation, or I suppose that's what acronym covers. S is for specific. It's basically speaking to the idea of goals that need to be clear in terms of what you are driving towards achieving. This now speaks to people who normally will just say, I would like to get a job, and then they just leave it there. And the next thing, their neighbor has got some work that they need to have done. And then the person is like, no, but I didn't want this kind of a job. I wanted something else. But because they were not clear from the very onset, they didn't mention where they would like to work, the type of work, the type of environment that they would like to have. So anything basically just goes. So that is what that specificity is basically in place to avoid. It's in place to avoid things that are not intended. It's in place to ensure that your focus is directed towards a certain form of action. Remember last week we spoke about naming or putting or describing your goal rather in a way that sensitizes you to the action that you need to take. So specificity is another subset of that. Basically, it allows you to focus towards a particular area. You may want a job, but maybe you do not want to be a gardener. Maybe you don't want to be a doctor because you've not studied to be a doctor. You don't want to be a lawyer because perhaps it's not the field that you want to specialize in. So it can apply to any particular area, and it's basically saying be very specific about the goals that you have set. By being specific, it needs to speak to a particular action. Don't leave it open-ended. When someone else takes the book on which you've written it, if you've written it in a book, they must be able to have a clear understanding of what you are trying to get at. So as a starter, you can write it down and pass it on to somebody and have them speak back to you what they understand you to mean. And up until they can say what you mean, perhaps you have not clarified or have been specific as much as you thought you were. So refine it over time as well. So that's the idea around specificity. Then we've got the term of measurability. Now measurability is speaking basically in the process of you looking to attain the goal and the goals that you have set. At any one point in time, between the time that you set it and the time that you are to achieve it or you are to reach its finality, you must be able to determine how far you have progressed and how much work you still need to do. So now how that works is that it's easier when you're working with things like money, for instance. So if you want to accumulate a particular amount of money, you are able to tell at any one point how much money you have accumulated and how much money you still need to accumulate. So the idea that this brings basically to the goals that we set is basically around you being able to quantify what stage you are at in reference to where you want to go. So basically, it's calling for you to design a goal in such a way that it's not just the end point. You'll remember that one of the questions that we asked was basically speaking to the idea of how does this apply when a goal is binary. When we say it's binary, it's either you have achieved it or you have not. For instance, if you want to buy a car, depending on how you phrase that or how you look at it, you can look at it as binary in the sense that you either have the car, that is you have met your goal, or you don't have the car, that your goal is not met. But if you describe your goal in a way that sensitizes you to the action that you need to do for you to get to buy a car, for instance, you can then set up stages in terms of I would like to save this much at this particular point in time. For instance, if your car costs 150,000, don't ask me where you find that car in this day and age, but if you find you want to buy a car at 150,000 and you've set yourself a period of about, say, a year over which you need to save that 150,000, then you can pretty much drill it down to a monthly basis or even a weekly basis. And then as weeks and months pass, you know where you should be. And as such, you can then quantify and say, at this particular point, I am 70% towards achieving my goal of buying a car. So that speaks to basically reducing any goal that you have set for yourself into the action items that you need to do. So as you tick them off your book, you are basically being sensitized to how far you have gone, how much more you still need to do. This can happen in instances like dating, for instance. Don't ask me how you apply it to dating, but we're going to talk about it. It can happen to savings. It can happen with fitness. It can happen with a learning process. Before we get into those now, I want us to speak about the fact that it's possible that you have set up your goal in a way that sensitizes you to the action that you need to take, in the sense that that process can be fully successful, but it's still possible that you won't meet the goal that you had set. Pick dating, for instance. You can pick out all the stages of dating that you want to go through, and the things that you need to do, and the things that you'd like to know about a person at any one point in time. And if your goal, of course, is to get married and you want to go through that process through dating, you can tick all the boxes of dating, and then the moment you ask the question and the person says no. So there is that distinction still. The fact that you have drilled your goal down to the individual stages does not necessarily by itself mean that you will have achieved your goal. What it does basically is to set you up to be able to achieve your goal. It gives you the best chance, and that's the idea. And the idea here is that you do not think just because you've drilled down to individual actions, everything will happen automatically. Each and every stage, including the final stage, requires you to be very deliberate, to be very consistent throughout. It requires you to maintain the same level of focus throughout. So that's what we would like to speak about today. And this is the other point that I put down that I'd like to speak about, or rather to mention here, is that the ability to pick up how much more still needs to be done, and basically how far you have come. That's the opposite of that. It gives you a certain sense of progress, and progress by nature is a fuel. The more you accomplish, the more you want to accomplish. The more you accomplish, the more it tells you that you are capable. So that's why it's important to be able to measure progress with any type of goal, even as binary as it may seem. Like we've made an example with buying a car. You either have the car or you don't. You can look at it that way. With that one, you're basically failing all the way up until you pass. There's no progress there if you look at it that way. But if you break it down into individual stages, then there's a chance then that you might be motivated much more than someone who does not do that. The A in that SMART speaks to achievability. Now, this is the one I tend to struggle with a lot, purely because of my faith. And within my faith, we speak of faith itself now as being the substance of things that are not seen, the evidence of things hoped for. So when you think about that, you think that everything should be achievable because faith brings it into the realm of things that are achievable. So let's start here. Up until the way you measure achievability and your level of faith speak to one another, then these two things will always be at odds with one another. Achievability speaks to the practicality or the realistic nature of the goals that you have set. Now, realistic or practicality is basically speaking to the logical full circle of understanding of whether your goal can happen or not. For instance, if you have no job that you are working in that pays you, it is a bit difficult for logic to justify why you would want to buy a car, for instance, because where are you going to get the money? And even when you've got this car, how are you going to keep it moving? How are you going to service it? How are you going to add fuel to it? How are you going to basically take care of it? So logic says that in that circumstance, that goal is not achievable in that sense. But when you bring the aspect of faith, which I do agree does not touch on logic, for that matter, achievability needs to be measured within the realms of your faith. That is my thinking when it comes to personal goals. And that this does not necessarily mean the way we sometimes explain faith, because sometimes we put faith in this magical realm that says, if I think about it long enough and I dream about it, or it gets stressed in me in any way, or I highlight the level of how desperate I am about it, then I am being, or rather I'm showing faith. And that is not faith. Faith is basically a belief that is backed by action. And when it comes to personal goals now and their achievability, basically, it's a belief that I can be able to do this. And not only that, you then start walking in that kind of belief. You back up your belief, basically. So the goals that you have set now, when you bring it in this context, you are basically backing them up with action from day one. So that then speaks to achievability, because it's not enough to believe, but you acting as if this thing will not work out. Because in that context, that achievability question is not ticked. It's not achievable because you have set it as a target, but you are not walking towards the target. So that's what we wanted to speak about there. And for the other example that we can make as well is around lobola and marriage. When it comes to getting married, most African families will require the payment of lobola for their daughter. And the idea here is that if you want to get married and you're measuring your goal just as getting married, then you will remain unmarried up until the day you get married. So you will be literally failing in your goal up until the day you pass. Hopefully that day comes. But if you break it down now to the process that you need to go through to get married, things like paying lobola, like we've mentioned, things like getting in touch with the family, even proposing. Some people just expect this thing to just fall out of the sky. But anyway, that whole process is basically speaking to the idea of achievability of your goal, because you have brought in the things that you need to do. Yes, you believe you will get married, that's belief, but you are backing it up with action. So that now marries achievability with faith. Otherwise, if you leave those two things apart, then it's difficult to speak in the Christian context about achievability, because you will then come across as someone who does not have enough faith, or even as small as a mustard seed for that matter. And then the other component of SMART is relevant. It's relevant. So now you ask yourself, what do you mean relevant? What are you speaking to when you're saying relevant? And then I thought about this one hard, and then it got highlighted that as an individual, you are standing for a particular purpose. You are standing for a particular reason. There are certain things that fit into your life and some that do not fit. So a goal in this case is relevant as far as it aligns with the purpose for your life. So if what you have been set up to do, by being set up to do, I'm speaking now to the presence of God. So if you do not recognize God, if what your life is looking to achieve, see, that is very neutral. If you don't believe in that way as well, and you believe in chance, if the chance that you would like to work towards does not align to the goals that you set. See, now we've covered a number of things. We've covered it in the Christian context. We've covered it in the secular context of somebody who recognizes the presence of God but doesn't necessarily believe in that they should be submitting to God. That's strange still. Then or somebody who doesn't believe in God altogether, relies on chance, everything is a coincidence, basically everywhere. So in that case, when we speak of relevance, it needs to align to what you want, the bigger goal at the end. Because if it clashes with that, there are very high chances that you will not achieve it, you will not attain it. And the idea as well is, there's what they speak of as push goals or pull goals. And the idea here is basically things that you like doing. Those ones are pull goals. It's easier for you to do. But things that you need to pump yourself up to do, those are push goals. So now this one is speaking to say that it must align with your purpose. It must be something that ties in. So now your purpose will be the one that pulls you into doing it. It will be the one that draws you into doing it. It doesn't necessarily mean to say you will like it, but there is something bigger than you that will draw you to ensure that the goal that you have set is achieved. That's purpose, basically. It's basically speaking to how does it align with your being. And the last part is basically touching on it being time-bound. And this one, I think we tend to understand it much more clearly, much more clearer across the board. And it's basically speaking to have timelines. It's not enough to tell someone's daughter that you want to marry them. You must give them a time frame. You must give them targets. You must give them milestones in terms of the things that you are going to be ticking along the way. Basically, these are the things that will convince them that you intend indeed to honor what you have promised to do. That's speaking in a different context. But when it comes to your own personal goals, we're speaking about 2021. You cannot be setting up goals in 2021 for 2021 that you know that you're not going to do anything about. So you take, depending on the day that you set it and how much effort it needs, you take the remainder of the year, if you want to do it in 2021, and basically break it down to the different stages that you will need to cover to ensure that it's achieved. So that's what, we're looking to speak to when we're speaking about it being bound within time. Because if it is outside the confines of time, that is basically in the God realm, then any day could be the day that you need to set to basically achieve that, which is not necessarily what we're looking to speak to. We're looking for something that is manageable, something that at any one point in time, we spoke of specificity. As specific as it is, it must be specific within a set time. So that is what we wanted to speak about today, and we hope that you can take that. As you have seen, there are certain instances where you may have a goal, but you cannot measure it as we're speaking now. It's one of those things that will either be or not. So in that case, when it comes to the concept or the part of SMART goals that is like measurable, then it won't tick that box. And it not ticking a particular box out of the 5 does not necessarily invalidate it. That's one other thing. But what it does, basically, it draws your focus. It gives you much more information that you may have first set up in terms of understanding how much work you need to do. Because that's what matters more than any other thing. Yes, you have set the end goal, you've broken down the amount of action that you need to basically cover or do. But what that whole process does, which otherwise you may be without, is that it sensitizes you to how much more work or how much work or what work in what way when you are basically to do all of that to ensure that your goal is achieved. And as you probably can tell, it does not cover things like wishes, because wishes do not have particular actions that attach to them. It's just an expression of an end state that you'd like to reach in any particular action or in any particular course of events. And that's not what we're speaking about here. When we're speaking about personal goals, we're speaking about things, yes, that you may wish to happen, but that you intend to put in the work to ensure that they do come about to happen. So thank you very much for watching, and we hope that was useful, and we hope that you can be able as well to continue subscribing for those that have not yet subscribed. And we ask that you may please share in your own individual platforms as well about our channel. We would like to continue sharing this content, and the idea is basically to give us an idea of what it means to set up personal goals. And much more than that, it's looking to speak about us getting into action. Over and above us speaking about it, what are we doing about it? It's not enough to want to start something. What are you doing about it? Otherwise, you're as good as someone who's just wishing about it. So that's what we are doing. So next week, which is the last episode of the Personal Goals series, we're looking at what makes people fail. I know we're finishing on a very negative note, but you'll get an idea of what we collectively looking to do over these episodes. And the idea there is to highlight certain things. Sometimes they may be small, sometimes they may be big, sometimes they may be obvious, sometimes they may not be as obvious. The things that inhibit us or draw us away from the path of success on our personal goals. We've already touched on one or two of them when we spoke of motivation earlier on. So we're going to be speaking on those things. So what do you do when that emotion is not flowing through, when that willingness to get up from the bed to go jog or to go run or to go to the gym or to save money, or when the money that is coming in is not enough for the goals that you have set or what it needs to cover? So we're speaking to those things. What do you do? Because over and above having that intention and even setting out what actions you need to do, you need to be someone who is agile. You need to adjust to how the year is panning out, because more often than not, the idea we have of how a year will be and how it actually is tend to be very different. And we want to avoid having instances where people are reaching July and already they are calling for December. Why? Because things have happened within the first 6 months that throw people off. So that's what we want to speak to next week. And over and above that, we want to speak to how do you get in charge of the emotion that normally derails people. We've spoken about the fact that personal goals should not be led by feelings. They should not be governed by desire alone. They need to have that, yes, but layered with action. So now we want to speak about at what point or what do you do when that willingness to put the action into that desire, into that feeling is just not connecting. So please do join us. And thank you very much. We appreciate all the feedback. So thank you so much. We thank you and we love you. I know that sounds very touchy-feely, but hey, that's us. Thank you. Bye.